Willow Heart sneered at me when I announced my resignation. I stayed calm, keeping my gaze steady and quiet. The conversation had been about the company's choice to cut labor costs, and Willow seemed to enjoy blaming those who took advantage of overtime pay. Camden Brooks, her little shadow, seemed just as excited about cutting expenses. A week later, my phone rang nonstop with calls from the company. When I finally answered, the president sharply asked, "Who exactly are you?" I couldn't help it. I laughed. I introduced myself as Harper Quinn, a 57-year-old employee with 35 years of loyal service since graduating college. I explained how our company provided administrative services, especially for busy presidents of other companies, helping them with clerical tasks and handling tax-related matters. I was proud to say I managed 40 clients. However, despite having a part-time helper, the workload had become overwhelming. But I couldn't show weakness. My clients had relied on me for years, and their struggles pushed me to keep going. Today, as I sat at my computer, Camden and Willow's constant harassment was on my mind. Camden, who was 7 years younger than me and now head of the tax department, had completely changed after his promotion 3 months ago. His once polite attitude had turned rude, and he often complained, making every interaction difficult. Even when I tried to stand up for myself, he didn't care and would just tell me to follow the manual, warning me not to take unnecessary steps. Willow, who worked as Camden's assistant, also joined in the bullying. She criticized my work efficiency and made fun of my position, even though I had turned down the chance to become the department head, a fact neither of them knew. I continued doing my job, but the harassment didn't stop. Camden accused me of working too much overtime, saying it was wasteful, and Willow would sigh and agree, claiming that my overtime was hurting the whole department's performance. The real reason for my overtime was that Camden had dumped a month's worth of client files on my desk, telling me they had to be done by the end of the month. After work, I looked at the pile of files, feeling exhausted. "Wait, all these have deadlines this month?" I asked myself in confusion. But before I could fully process the situation, Camden was already packing up his desk, uninterested in my concerns. "I'm heading out." "Good luck with that," he said casually as he left the office, leaving me with an overwhelming amount of work. Willow soon followed, adding to my frustration with a mocking laugh. As I sat there, I realized that some of the files had been Willow's responsibility. That's when it hit me. Camden and Willow were trying to push me into retiring. My extensive experience and deep knowledge of taxation made me a valuable resource for the rest of the department, even more than Camden. His unfriendly attitude and unattractive personality made people avoid him, except for Willow, who seemed to stay close to him for strategic reasons. It was clear that Willow was trying to impress Camden, and her harassment wasn't just personal. She wanted to win his favor, as he was the one evaluating the department's performance. Despite the challenges, I had to keep working, balancing my regular tasks with preparing tax declarations for my clients. The workload seemed endless, but I knew if I claimed overtime, Camden and Willow would complain even more. So I resigned myself to working extra hours without pay. Then, unexpectedly, I was called to the president's office. Our company had recently gotten a new president after the former president became ill. The new president, his son, didn't know much about the company yet. When I walked into the office, I saw Camden and Willow smirking at me. The atmosphere was tense as the president dropped a bombshell. "Harper, we need you to resign by the end of the month." My head spun. I asked for more information, and it turned out that Camden and Willow had accused me of overbilling for overtime. While others had around 15 hours of overtime, they claimed I had worked over 60. The president, unaware of the real situation, seemed impressed by Camden and Willow's zero overtime record. It was then that the truth hit me. The extra overtime was because I had been doing both Camden and Willow's work. But if I told the president that, it might look like I couldn't manage my time properly. I calmly explained the situation, stating that I hadn't overbilled for overtime, but had simply struggled to finish the massive workload within regular hours. The president sighed deeply, unsure of what to do. He doubted my story but admitted there wasn't enough evidence to take action against me. Even so, the weight of their accusations hung heavily in the air. He insisted that they couldn't keep someone who worked at such a slow pace. Resigned to the situation, it was clear the president had made up his mind. He suggested I resign, and there wasn't much left for me to argue. After dedicating 35 years of my life to the company, I was being asked to leave. A deep weariness washed over me. Despite all my hard work, especially the extra tasks dumped on me by Camden and Willow, none of it seemed to matter. I agreed to leave at the end of the month, reminding the president that I had already informed him of my intention to resign. As I glanced at Camden and Willow, their smug smiles told me they were more than satisfied with the outcome. Willow, with her usual sarcasm, taunted me as I left the president's office, saying, "Thanks for quitting." Her words cut through me, but I kept silent, responding with just a steady gaze. Camden also made his approval clear, gleefully talking about how happy he was to cut labor costs. He even went as far as to label me someone who exploited overtime pay. As they chatted excitedly, I began thinking about the handover process. I needed to organize documents for all my clients and make sure everything was in order before I left. I personally said goodbye to as many clients as I could, ensuring appointments were set up, where possible, for those I couldn't meet. I sent letters to let them know who their new point of contact would be. A week after my resignation, I was enjoying some quiet time at home when my phone rang. Seeing the company's number on the screen, I hesitated. I had already completed all my paperwork, including social insurance procedures, so I didn't see a reason to answer. However, after receiving several calls from both the company and Camden and Willow's personal phones, I reluctantly picked up. The president's urgent voice came through the line. "Who exactly are you?" he asked again. I couldn't help but chuckle and replied, "Just an unemployed woman who resigned, that's all." His tone became even more anxious as he explained the chaos that had erupted since I left. 40 clients have called to stop doing business with us," he revealed, his panic evident. He practically begged for me to come back, saying everything had fallen apart. Sighing, I stood up and made my way back to the company. When I arrived, I saw Camden and Willow waiting for me. They looked exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes and a noticeable change in their appearance. It surprised me, and I asked what was going on. Camden glared at me and said angrily, "Since you left, we've been flooded with calls. Clients are canceling transactions, not just yours, but also from companies we were planning to work with. What did you do?" Willow, looking equally frustrated, echoed his accusation. Her weary appearance showed how much the situation had taken a toll on her. Both of them suspected I had done something underhanded to cause all the cancellations. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I had a feeling I knew why the clients were leaving. Thinking out loud, I mumbled my thoughts. Camden, however, wasn't satisfied with my explanation. He outright accused me of orchestrating the chaos and demanded I go with him to the president's office immediately. Without waiting for my agreement, he practically dragged me there. As we entered the office, Camden declared, "President, I've brought her," with a sense of authority, while Willow followed closely behind. Ignoring their harsh tone, the president turned to me and asked about the sudden stop in transactions after my departure. I took a deep breath and explained, "Our clients don't need us to manage their taxes. There are plenty of accounting firms that offer cheaper services. The only reason they stayed with us was because of me." Camden, annoyed, shot back, "Who do you think you are?" Willow sneered as well, questioning my worth to the company. But I stayed calm and continued explaining that I had always offered personalized tax-saving strategies, which made my clients stick with us. It wasn't just about doing the job, it was about offering them something valuable. Camden dismissed my approach as inefficient, arguing that their manual, by-the-book methods were better. The president sighed deeply, recognizing that Camden and I had very different ways of doing things. He looked serious as he said, "Actually," his tone signaled that something important was about to be revealed. "I received a surprising call from my father, the former president," he began. "It turns out that some of the clients who canceled came directly to him to negotiate, asking if we could bring you back." I was shocked. I hadn't expected clients to go that far for me. The president's father emphasized that the tax department had been thriving because of my contributions. Not only had I managed my own clients effectively, but I had also helped other colleagues with theirs. You knew more than even Camden did, the president added. If you hadn't turned down the promotion to department head, you would have been in a much higher position by now. The president's face showed regret. Willow looked stunned, as if she was struggling with the idea that I could have been her superior. The president apologized for making me resign in the first place, clearly realizing the mistake they had made. He asked if I would consider taking back my resignation, explaining that according to his father, I was indispensable to the company. While I appreciated this sudden change in perspective, I hesitated to accept. Before I could respond, Camden interrupted, visibly upset. He protested the president's decision, questioning why I was chosen over him. Willow quickly backed him up, praising Camden's leadership and expressing disbelief that I was being favored. But the president wasn't having it. He sternly addressed them, revealing that since I had resigned, numerous complaints had surfaced from the tax department. It seemed Camden had been shifting his workload onto others, even handing off some of Willow's work to subordinates. Camden's face turned pale as the president exposed the truth. Camden had been dumping his client work onto others while accusing me of being a thief. The irony of the situation became clear as the president explained how Camden had been manipulating the system all along. To make matters worse, the president brought up rumors about Camden and Willow's romantic involvement. Camden tried to brush it off, claiming he was just mentoring Willow as her superior, but the president wasn't convinced. He had receipts from the accounting department showing expensive dinners that Camden had charged to the company. Confronted with the evidence, Camden was at a loss for words, sweating profusely. Willow turned ghostly pale, realizing the seriousness of the situation. The president accused them both of neglecting their duties, inflating expense claims, and violating company policy by having an affair, especially while Camden was married. In a calm but firm manner, the president announced their immediate termination. Camden and Willow tried to resist. Camden desperately pleaded, "I have a family." Willow echoed his sentiment, her voice shaking with fear at the thought of being fired. She promised to apologize to me and others for piling work on us, but it was too late. Her concern about her reputation only heightened her desperation. She begged for a second chance, but the damage was done. Sensing their desperation, I couldn't help but offer some advice. "Why don't you stop resisting? It's undignified," I said calmly. Camden glared at me and snapped, "Shut up! What would a single person like you know?" I sighed and replied, "Camden, you are the one who got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Maybe it's time to take some responsibility." Camden looked away, clearly frustrated, while Willow bit her lip in distress. I knew more about their misconduct and turned to the president with a smile, asking, "Should I share the rest?" Both Camden and Willow immediately panicked, trying to stop me from revealing more, but I issued them a warning. Wrongdoings eventually come to light, and they should face reality before things got even worse. At that, Camden and Willow collapsed to their knees, pleading for mercy. The president, however, had made up his mind and fired them on the spot. Later, I revealed the full extent of Camden and Willow's misdeeds, including how Camden had faked business trips to spend days with Willow, and how they had bullied other employees into quitting. They would give them sudden tasks with impossible deadlines, making their lives miserable until they left. Some of those employees had asked me to stay quiet at the time, but since they had moved on to better jobs, I decided it was time to speak up. The president was furious at the revelations, especially about the inflated expense claims. He expressed his anger over how they had manipulated the system and planned to cut Camden and Willow's final pay. Camden, with tears in his eyes, begged the president not to dock his salary, fearing the impact on his family, but the truth about his affair with Willow had already spread. It led to Camden's divorce, and both of them now faced compensation claims as part of the lawsuit. I became aware of the full situation when Camden reached out to me, asking for help persuading the president to reconsider their firings. Desperate, Camden and Willow had found themselves in a dire situation. Because of the tight-knit nature of the tax industry, word of their misconduct had spread fast, making it nearly impossible for them to find new jobs. They struggled to make ends meet, and eventually both were forced to take on day labor at construction sites, a far cry from their previous office roles. Willow would often call me, crying and pleading for help. "Harper, please help. I just wanted a better life." "I never really liked Camden," she sobbed over the phone. But despite her tears, I couldn't ignore the fact that their situation was a consequence of their own actions. Many people, myself included, had suffered because of their behavior. I firmly reminded Willow, "You can't unring a bell. What's done is done. The consequences you're facing now are because of the choices you made." Willow's protests were filled with regret, but there was nothing she could do to change the outcome. She had to face the reality of her actions, just as Camden did. As for me, I felt a sense of closure. Though their downfall didn't bring me joy, it brought a sense of justice for the unfair treatment I and others had endured. While they struggled with the mess they had created, I was ready to move forward, knowing that sometimes what goes around truly does come around. That said, I decided to distance myself from the chaos of the corporate world. Even though the president begged me to come back, I had no desire to return. Once I had been told to resign, the door was closed for me. Instead, I found peace helping out at a friend's small tax office. It was a way to earn some extra money while enjoying a much more relaxed lifestyle. I no longer had to deal with the stress and drama that came with working in a big company. Looking ahead, I began to dream about starting my own tax office. I imagined a place where I could serve my clients in a personal and meaningful way, without all the red tape and corporate rules. I wanted to create an environment where I could focus fully on my clients' needs and be on equal terms with them. As a tax accountant, my goal was to provide a service where my clients felt valued, not treated like just another number in a system. This marked the start of a new chapter in my life. It was a chapter filled with excitement and new opportunities. I was free to pursue what truly mattered to me, creating something of my own and building stronger relationships with the people I worked with. My second life was just beginning, and I couldn't wait to see where this journey would take me. No longer tied down by corporate demands, I felt lighter and more in control of my future. Every day brought a new sense of purpose, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My focus was clear: to build a business where I could thrive and where my clients could trust that their needs were my top priority. As I moved forward, I knew this new path was the one I had been waiting for, a chance to grow both personally and professionally in ways I hadn't thought possible before. With a heart full of optimism and determination, I eagerly anticipated what lay ahead. Story 2. Reagan's little Boston flat is filled with junk at nightfall, and the illumination from her laptop screen creates lengthy shadows. Outside, the city hummed with life, but Reagan was laser-focused on the spreadsheet in front of her. The numbers stared back at her damning and unrelenting $300,000. She whispered, her voice barely audible over the buzz of her ancient desk lamp. The money designated for innovative medical research had disappeared from the Foundation's books. Reagan slumped back in her chair, her mind whirling. She was a researcher by trade. However, it was like entering a crime thriller. Cross-referencing Foundation reports and bank statements, her fingers swept across the keyboard. The trail of transactions was like a neon arrow pointing straight to one person, her mother. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, memories surfacing unbidden. Her mother, Paula, had always been a master manipulator, wielding charm and power with surgical precision. Reagan had lived her infancy in the shadow of that force of nature. Her talents are eclipsed by her stepsister Annabelle's sparkling social successes. The buzzing of her phone broke the silence. She glanced at the screen. A text from Annabelle, her mother's golden kid. "The scholar is making Mom crazy. You're not skipping again, are you? She claims it's vital. Be there." Reagan's jaw tightened as she typed a curt reply. "I'll give it some thought." Before she could put her phone down, a tap at the door shocked her. Jasper, her lab colleague, walked in, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. As he observed the expression on her face, his informal smile vanished. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting the cups down and leaning over her shoulder. His easygoing nature had been a lifeline during their grueling hours in the lab, but tonight, even he looked concerned. She turned the laptop toward him. Take a look at this. The quarterly reports from the foundation do not correspond with the bank statements. Money has been being siphoned off of the research grants by someone. Jasper scowled as he looked over the information. That's not just an error. Are you sure about this? Reagan nodded. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. The transactions trace back to the treasurer. Mom. The weight of the words settled in the air between them. Jasper let out a low whistle. What are you going to do? She hesitated. The magnitude of the situation settling in. I don't know, but I can't let this go. Another buzz from her phone broke the tension. Annabelle once more? Remember that tomorrow is dress fitting. For the gala, Mom is organizing the ideal family activity. Reagan's lips twisted into a bitter grin. Perfect family moment. The irony wasn't lost on her. Closing her laptop, she met Jasper's eyes. I believe it's time for me to break their rules. Reagan moved as stealthily as a thief into her mother's home office. It was late, and the huge brownstone was unnaturally silent. The heater's hum and her own rapid breathing were the only sounds audible. Her mother had always kept a tight grip on her private affairs, but tonight, Reagan was ready to wrench them open. She plugged a USB drive into the sleek desktop and entered a password. Once she'd guessed from years of observing her mother's habits, the screen flickered and the desktop opened. Reagan's fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the shallow files meant for public scrutiny and diving deep into encrypted folders. Her pulse beat as she spotted an email thread labeled Project Legacy. It was between her mother and Trevor, Annabelle's fiancé. Reagan felt his stomach turn as he read the emails. It was more than simply embezzled money. This was systematic money laundering, bogus charities, offshore accounts, shell businesses. Everything pointed to a grander scheme that was using the upcoming gala as a smokescreen. A particularly damaging email grabbed her eye. Trevor, when Project Legacy is revealed, all eyes will be on it. The gala will be the perfect distraction. It will be beautifully presented by Annabelle. No one questions the perfect daughter. Reagan froze. Reading the line again. Annabelle was the face of this deception. Not intentionally, but unknowingly. Her stepsister's immaculate appearance was being used by her mother and Trevor to justify their corruption. Reagan's jaw tightened. Even if Annabelle was her mother's favorite, nobody should have to be treated this way. She transferred everything into her USB stick, careful not to leave a trace. As she pulled the drive free, she tensed when she heard a noise outside the door and the desk lamp flickered. She hastily closed the computer and withdrew into the shadows just as footsteps approached. Trevor's words floated into the room when the door cracked open a few moments later. Paula, we must complete the Project Legacy donor list. The gala is only 2 weeks away. Her mother spoke in a measured, harsh voice. Relax. I've handled the details, and Annabelle has the guest list committed to memory. Nobody is going to question anything, not even Reagan. She is too preoccupied with her studies to be aware of her surroundings. Reagan gripped a USB drive in her pocket more tightly. If only her mother knew. Reagan crept out a side door and into the cool night air as their talk came to an end. Back in her flat, she sat across from Jasper, laying the facts plain. Her voice was forceful as she stated, "This isn't just about stolen money. It's about my family's whole reputation. My mother and Trevor are using Annabelle as their shield. She doesn't even know." Jasper reclined back, arms folded. What is the plan then? Confront them, inform Annabelle. Reagan shook her head. Not just yet. If I go with them now, they'll bury this before anyone finds out. I need to expose them where they're most vulnerable. She glanced at the gala invitation on her desk, her resolve hardening at the gala in front of everyone. The knock at Reagan's apartment door was unexpected, but familiar. Annabelle was standing there, immaculately dressed, when she opened it. However, as usual, a hint of vulnerability in her expression tainted her normally composed demeanor. "Unexpected," Annabelle said, holding up a bag of takeout. "Brought lunch." Reagan stepped aside, cautious. Annabelle never visited unannounced. Annabelle strolled in, glancing around the cluttered apartment, still living like a grad student. "I see some of us prioritize substance over style," Reagan quipped. Shutting the door, Annabelle smirked, but the edge in her eyes remained. This gala is making my mother insane. You would think that the universe's destiny rested on the arrangement of the tables. She slipped upon the ancient couch, the tension in her shoulders betraying her casual demeanor. Reagan was examining her stepsister from the seat across from her. Why don't you just tell her to back off? Annabelle gave a bitter laugh. You think that's an option? No. I smile, nod, and say what she wants me to say. That's what I'm good for, right? The perfect prop for her social agenda. The words hung in the air, a rare crack in Annabelle's polished facade. Reagan paused, considering her next course of action. Annabelle. She started gently. What if I told you that she's doing just that? Using you as a diversion to disguise something far worse. Annabelle frowned, sitting up straighter. What are you talking about? After inhaling deeply, Reagan took out her laptop and opened the evidence folder. This must be seen by you. What is it? Annabelle leaned forward to ask. Proof. Mom and Trevor. The foundation is being used for money laundering. They have been preparing this event for years, and the gala is really a cover for it. Project Legacy. Annabelle's chuckle was uneasy. That's absurd. Mother wouldn't. She would. Reagan interrupted abruptly. Using fictitious charities, she has been embezzling funds from research grants and hiding them in offshore accounts. And you? Reagan's tone grew softer. You're the face of it all. Presenting their lies as fact, the ideal daughter. Annabelle's face paled. No. You're wrong. She'd never. She cares about the foundation. About me. Reagan tilted the screen toward her, exposing the email sequence between their mother and Trevor. Take a look at this. Annabelle's expression changed from shock to anger to disbelief as her eyes scanned the words. She pushed the laptop away. This can't be real. She wouldn't do this to me. She would, Reagan said gently. She has, and until we stop her, she will continue to do it. Abruptly, Annabelle got up and paced the tiny living room. She is Reagan, Trevor, and my mother. I'm meant to wed him? What am I, if I didn't see who they truly are as human? Reagan said as he turned to look at her. You can see now, though, and before it's too late, we have an opportunity to make this right. Annabelle paused her pacing and turned to face Reagan. You've already started a plan, haven't you? Yes. Jasper and I are accumulating evidence. But you are needed. You're the one on stage. You're the one people trust. We must expose them at the gala if we are to do so. Annabelle gazed at her, her face displaying a range of emotions. Finally, she nodded, her voice shaky but resolute. I'm on board. But if we're doing this, we're doing it correctly. I want all of the evidence. I want to see exactly what they've been hiding. Reagan nodded, relief washing over her. You'll get it. Everything. Annabelle's face became stern. Reagan, they take advantage of me. They made me a part of their lives. I will now ensure that everyone is aware of the truth. The unofficial war room was Reagan's apartment. On the coffee table, laptops were humming. Papers were strewn across every surface, and the scent of stale coffee lingered in the air. The three of them put the pieces of her mother's dishonesty together late into the night. Reagan responded. Sarah came through, displaying a large pile of papers that her mother's aide had surreptitiously brought. These are the original board meeting minutes and emails. They reveal she's been doctoring the reports for years. Jasper glanced over the papers, nodding in agreement. This is solid, combined with the financial records. We've got a clear trail, but we're running out of time. If she pushes ahead with the Project Legacy announcement, it'll legalize everything in the public view before we can stop her. Annabelle sat cross-legged on the couch, looking through her phone. She's been keeping me on a short leash ever since I said I wanted to tweak my speech. Trevor is becoming suspicious and is practically glued to me. Reagan frowned. What's he said? He keeps asking me who I'm talking to and what I'm working on. Last night he checked my laptop while I was in the shower. Annabelle looked up, her expression steely. He's aware that something's wrong. Then we need to act before they do, Jasper added. Reagan looked at her laptop, still glowing on the screen with the invites to the gala. We'll use the gala as our stage. Public exposure is our only choice. Annabelle shook her head. No more. Mom's moved the announcement. Tomorrow evening, she will host a private preview event. Key stakeholders only. No press. No cameras. Only those who have the authority to approve Project Legacy. Reagan, stomach sunk. That's too soon. We're not prepared. There's nothing we can do, Annabelle said. It's over if she gets their approval tomorrow. The gala will just be a celebration of her victory. Jasper leaned forward. Then we shift gears. Use the preview event instead of the gala. Although it's riskier, we have a more confined and regulated audience. Reagan's mind raced. We'll need access to the event space, audio, visuals, everything. If we can get the evidence on the major screens during her presentation, it'll compel the stakeholders to confront the reality. And it will be me who does it, Annabelle said, her voice firm. Reagan hesitated. Are you sure? It's one thing to agree to this, but standing up to her in person, Annabelle cut her off. She's definitely had enough of me acting as her puppet. I'm cutting the strings tomorrow. The next day, the trio divided tasks with military precision. In order to deflect the staff's attention, Annabelle insisted on practicing her speech in the event hall, which distracted her mother. Jasper put their files on the antivirus program. Reagan kept vigil near the exits, her heart pounding every time someone walked by. Nearing completion, Jasper murmured into his headset. The files are uploading to the main system. As soon as she starts, her presentation will override the slides with the evidence. Reagan's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. She's nervous. Trevor has been asking about security protocols. Be careful. She turned to Annabelle, who had just stepped off stage. Trevor and Mom are suspicious. We need to wrap this up and get out before they catch on. Annabelle nodded, brushing imaginary dust off her beautiful dress. Leave it to me. They won't notice anything else since they'll be too busy attempting to control every aspect of my performance. That evening, as the event hall began to fill with donors and board members, Reagan and Jasper monitored the AV booth. As she performed her part flawlessly, Annabelle stood close to her mother and Trevor. Remember, Jasper murmured, adjusting the earphone in Reagan's ear. Once she starts talking about Project Legacy, I'll activate the evidence on the displays. Prepare for the repercussions. Reagan watched her mother from the booth, dazzling in a sleek blue gown, greeting the visitors with grace and control. Reagan, however, noticed for the first time the cracks, a hint of nervousness in her smile, a glimmer of tension and her movements that she knew were part of a plan. Reagan whispered, "Excellent," Jasper answered. Let her squirm, as the event began. The tension in the air was palpable. Annabelle went up to the podium, a picture of poise under duress. Reagan held her breath as her stepsister began the speech they'd revised the night before. This is a pivotal moment. With a calm voice, Annabelle spoke. For everyone who values honesty, morality, and responsibility, not just this foundation. Reagan glanced at Jasper, who nodded. Let's get started. The screens behind Annabelle flickered to life as he pressed a button, revealing the damning evidence to everyone. The crowd gasped and rumors spread like wildfire. Annabelle turned to the screens, then back to the audience. This is Project Legacy's reality. Reagan emerged from the booth prepared to face the storm they had unleashed as chaos broke out. The grand ballroom of the Waverly Hotel was opulent, draped in gold and white, with chandeliers casting a warm glow over the carefully curated crowd. Board members, significant contributors, and key stakeholders blended their laughing and chat, hiding the tension seething under the surface. At the front of the room, a sleek stage with a big screen served as the focal point. Reagan and Jasper stood silently near the AV booth, eyes scanning the room while Annabelle mingled flawlessly with the attendees. She is good, Jasper muttered, watching Annabelle charm a group of donors. She's got years of practice, Reagan said. She stared at their mother, who was standing near the stage. Her trademark smile belies hawk-like alertness. With his phone in hand and his eyes darting suspiciously, Trevor lurked close by. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room. Paula took the stage, exuding confidence in her midnight blue gown. Good evening, everyone. She started, her voice dominating. Tonight we announce a vision for the future of our organization, one that honors our heritage while embracing innovation. But first, allow me to introduce the face of this transition. Annabelle, my daughter. As Annabelle took the podium, there was a burst of applause. She stopped and looked around the crowd. Her mother's eager grin was a startling contrast to the frigid resolve in Annabelle's gaze. "I'm grateful, Mom." With a steady voice, Annabelle started. "And I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Integrity and trust have always been the cornerstones of this foundation. But sometimes even the brightest legacies can cast the darkest shadows." The room moved uncomfortably. There were murmurs in the crowd. Paula paused her smile. "What are you doing?" Her mother hissed from the side, her voice just audible over the microphone. "Annabelle, disregard her and point to the screen behind her. We're honoring more than just a vision tonight. We're bringing the truth to light." Jasper flicked the button in the AV booth, and the screen behind Annabelle lighted up with bank paperwork, email conversations, and transaction data. Gasps flooded the room as the audience read the devastating evidence. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, and the deliberate embezzlement of research funding. Using this foundation as a cover, Annabelle went on, her voice now more forceful. "This is Project Legacy, not a plan to help people, but a scheme to funnel money into private accounts." Paula's poise dissolved as she bounded towards the stage. "Stop this crap right now. Safety." "Don't bother," Reagan murmured, coming out from the shadows and addressing the shocked crowd. "The evidence has already been sent to the authorities. Every transaction, every doctored report, it's all been documented and given to the FBI." Trevor's face drained of color, and he began retreating toward the exit. But as if on cue, the door swung open, and uniformed officers entered the ballroom. The announcement was made by Paula Horton and one of the cops, Trevor Marks, whose voice broke through the confusion. "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering." The crowd erupted into whispers and gasps. Paula whirled on Reagan, her face twisted in fury. "You're a little ungrateful." Reagan answered icily, "Save it. You taught us that outward appearances mattered, but you failed to recognize that the truth always comes through." Annabelle moved forward to speak to the assembly. "This foundation and everyone's trust in this room were betrayed by Trevor and my mother. But tonight, we begin rebuilding. Not with falsehoods, but with transparency." The room was alive with accusations and inquiries as Paula and Trevor were taken away in handcuffs. Reagan took the microphone. Despite the flurry of emotions, her voice remained steady. "We can't repair the harm they've caused, but we can guarantee it never occurs again. The foundation will operate with total openness moving forward. Every money will be accounted for, and every choice will serve the people. The purpose of this foundation was to assist." The clapping was cautious at first, but got louder as Annabelle stood behind Reagan, nodding in accord. Jasper joined them at the edge of the stage. His smile was wry. "That went as nicely as we could have hoped, I guess." As Reagan saw her mother and Trevor vanish through the ballroom doors, she let out a breath that felt like a weight had been lifted off her chest. "It's finished," she said, more to herself than anybody else. Annabelle put a hand on her sister's shoulder and reprimanded her. "It's only the beginning." The courtroom filled with murmurs as the judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts, Paula Horton did not move. The weight of the shackles at her wrists is not well concealed by her expensive clothing. She didn't glance at her girls as the bailiff escorted her away. Reagan, however, could sense the brewing rage emanating from her mother's rigid body. Sitting close by, Trevor had already made a deal. His evidence had sealed Paula's destiny in exchange for a lesser sentence, and the treachery had been the last fracture in their carefully crafted empire. Reporters crowded around Reagan and Annabelle outside the courthouse. The microphones protruded like spears. "What are your thoughts on your mother's conviction?" a reporter inquired. Reagan inhaled deeply, calmly meeting the gaze of the crowd. "Today, justice was done. This foundation was established to assist individuals, and it will continue to do just that." Beside her, Annabelle spoke in a calm and firm voice, expressing her commitment to repairing the foundation's image and making sure that every patient, researcher, and contributor could rely on us. A new age characterized by ethics and transparency is dawning. The months that followed flew by. The board quickly appointed Reagan as Executive Director of Research and Annabelle as Director of Public Relations once the Foundation's leadership was completely dismantled. Together, they implemented comprehensive reforms, including stringent supervision procedures, real-time information on sponsored projects, and a public database that tracks every gift. To repair years of harm, the sisters worked side by side for long hours in the office. Annabelle, once the polished face of their mother's schemes, now used her charisma to reconnect with donors and reassure stakeholders. Reagan was as thorough as ever, making sure that every project had the resources it required and that every dollar was tracked down. One evening, as they reviewed the final draft of the Foundation's annual report, Annabelle leaned back in her chair, smiling. "You know," she said, "I would have laughed in your face if you had told me 6 months ago that we would be working together." Reagan smirked, setting down her pen. "I would have laughed back if you had told me you would genuinely care about this work." Annabelle laughed softly, but her expression grew serious. "I'm sorry, Reagan. For all the years I let her turn us against one another, I ought to have realized it." Reagan reached out, gripping her sister's hand. "Both of us ought to have. But the important thing is that we're here now." The moment was cut short by a knock on the door. Jasper poked his head in a playful grin on his face. "I don't want to interrupt the sisterly bonding, but a Times reporter is downstairs. They want a quotation for their feature on the Legacy Reborn." Annabelle stood, adjusting her blazer. "Let's give them something good." Reagan followed a sense of pride swelling in her chest as they stepped out into the bustling Foundation office. The logo on the wall now gleamed brighter, a symbol of the fresh start they had fought to create. Together, they walked toward the waiting cameras side by side, united not by their mother's manipulation, but by their shared commitment to building something real. Their mother's empire had crumbled. However, the sisters had created a genuine legacy from the rubble, one in which they could now really take pride. Story 3. The living room was filled with a cozy glow from the Christmas tree's sparkling lights. The frigid tension in the air was mocked by their joy. Zero's hands held the envelope. It weighed significantly more than one sheet of paper. Before she even opened it, her father's grim face told her all she needed to know. This wasn't going to be a joyful Christmas Eve. "Well," Michaela's sugary sweet voice pierced through the quiet like a dagger. She was already showing off the diamond bracelet she had just gotten as she sat on the arm of their mother's favorite leather chair. "Aren't you going to open it?" As she broke the seal, the crackling blaze did nothing to warm her heart. She trembles her fingers. Her eyes scanned the phrases that validated her worst dread as she unfolded the paper. Her voice was remarkably firm as she added, "You're cutting me out of the well." Vanessa, her mother, didn't even look up from her wine glass when she gazed up at her. Vanessa's tone was brimming with studied indifference as she said, "It's for the best, dear. We have made our decisions, and you have made yours. My choices." Zero gave a halting chuckle. "You mean choosing to follow my passion instead of living under your thumb? Starting my bakery instead of joining the family firm?" Her father's lips curved into a scowl. He sneered, "A bakery. Your schooling cost us a fortune. In order to make cupcakes, you discard it. Not all of them are cupcakes. All of them are shot back." She raised her voice. "I have a dream about it." "Dreams don't pay bills," he replied sternly. "Michaela is aware of her responsibilities. She's already making a name for herself at the firm." The lights from the Christmas tree danced in Michaela's eyes as she grinned. "Oh, Cyril, don't be so theatrical. You anticipated this." The paper was delicately folded. She got to her feet, her hand shaking. She smoothed the front of her dress and answered, "Actually, I had higher expectations for my family. Silly me. Where are you heading?" her father demanded as she took her coat from the rack. "Not even dinner has been served." "I don't feel hungry," Zero said, slipping inside the jacket that scratches. She turned back to them, and her hand hesitated on the doorknob. "You know, you think you're punishing me, but really?" She smiled, a flash of rebellion in her eyes. "You're torturing yourselves more than you realize." "What's that intended to mean?" Michaela's smirk wavered as she asked. "Merry Christmas!" Ignoring the question, Zero said. "Good luck, too. You're going to need it." The thick oak door slammed behind her with a gratifying thud, muffling the sounds of her father's objections and her mother's loud reproach. Outside, snow drifted softly, blanketing the earth in quiet. With her breath evident in the icy night air, Zero took out her phone and dialed a number. "Natasha!" Her voice was now steady as she spoke. Yes, it's finished. They did precisely what we anticipated. Her boots crunched in the new snow as she headed to her car. No, I'm okay. Actually, I'm better than okay. Do you recall what we discussed? I believe the moment has come. The family estate appeared smaller in her rearview mirror as she drove off. The brilliant lights of the Christmas tree were faraway specks engulfed by the icy night. Michaela texted her, and her phone buzzed. I hope you're content with who you are. Christmas has been destroyed by you, she typed back with a smile. The opposite, sis. I have never gotten a better Christmas present than this one. Liberty. She headed towards downtown, and the future she had decided upon for herself as she turned onto the main road. She believed that some legacies were not inherited. Observing her tire tracks being erased by the snow, they were developed from scratch, like the ideal cake. At the edge of the frozen lake, the holiday home remained unaltered. Time and filth have stained its once immaculate siding. The sound of Zero jingling the keys in her palm pierced the clear winter air like a victorious tune. As she got out of the car, Natasha gave a low whistle. They just forgot this was in your name, and her breath was fogging in the cold. Shaking her head incredulously, Natasha ran her fingers along the faded wood railing. An whole vacation home. Really, it was 5 years ago. Zero clarified. The door is unlocked. Dad put it in my name for some tax loophole. He most likely doesn't even recall its existence. The room was stuck in time when the door creaked open. Dusty picture frames, pine furniture, and nautical accents conveyed the tale of a family that had previously called this place home. It resembled a museum of memories now, no longer desired. What is the estimated value of this location? Natasha inquired. Looking through the windows on the lake, Zero showed her the realtor's estimate on her phone. Natasha's gaze expanded. Holy, that's enough to open the bakery, then some. Exactly, Zero said, running her fingers along the dusty kitchen counter. The first year's rent and the down payment equipment were being solidified by the plan that had been simmering in the back of her thoughts. Everything. I must begin. Natasha grinned. When your parents learn about it, they will go crazy. They won't. Zero answered, removing a cobweb off the corner of a framed portrait. Before it's too late, that is. They signed this house over to me, fair and square. The selling is entirely lawful. She opened the fridge, grimacing at the aged condiments within. Natasha slumped into a couch, bringing up a cloud of dust. Okay, walk me through this master plan of yours. She paced as she stated, It's easy. I move downtown, sell the house, and start the Dreamweaver bakery. My family in the meanwhile. With a cheeky smile on her lips, she drifted off. What? Natasha sat up and asked. How about them? She hesitated, then leaned against the counter, crossed her arms. Let's just say they're precious. The firm's performance isn't as good as they would want everyone to believe. Natasha's eyebrow went up. How are you aware of that? Brett mentioned an acquaintance from college who was now employed at a commercial bank. Their most recent loan application wasn't quite accepted, he said. Their debt is overwhelming them. Natasha whistled quietly. As their empire collapses, you are not just financing your ambition, but also pursuing it. Girl, that's some serious retaliation. Retaliation isn't the point. Zero replied, but she was deceived by the fire in her eyes. It's about taking care of myself at last. Yes, Natasha smirked and said, Tell me when you're prepared to acknowledge that it involves some retaliation, regardless of what you say. Her days were filled with whispered phone conversations and paperwork for covert real estate agents throughout the course of the following few weeks. She was surprised at how quickly the property sold. It turns out that even in the middle of winter, lakefront real estate was in high demand. One morning, Brett met her for coffee and went over her completed business plan. I must confess, he remarked, looking at the data. When you initially informed me of this, I assumed you were simply letting off steam. However, this. She handed him a lavender honey cake, which he tasted. This is amazing. Zor-El said, That's not even my best recipe. Pulling out her laptop, she showed him the location she'd chosen for her bakery. A comfortable place in the center of the city. What are your thoughts? High pedestrian traffic and affordable rent. Brett nodded as he spoke. Your assignment is done. But are you sure about burning this bridge with your families? Zell closed her laptop and stated, they burned it first. Furthermore, this is no longer about them. This is my life. She couldn't deny the happiness she felt, though, in her heart. Her ambition was more than just selling the house. It was the opening move in a game that her family was playing without even realizing it. The keys to the downtown shop jingled in her palm as she stood outside the tiny brick structure. Something far more thrilling had taken the place of the fading for lease sign, the Dreamweaver Bakery's future location. She could almost picture people being drawn in by the aroma of freshly baked pastries and the golden glow of light fixtures pouring onto the pavement. As they entered, Natasha said, "Not bad," while holding a box of paint samples. "However, you have a lot of work ahead of you." She grinned, running her fingers over the antique wooden counter. "I'm not scared of work. The simple things are what work." The weeks that followed were filled with a lot of activity. Layers of the building's history were removed as contractors completely demolished the area. She focused on every little detail, from choosing the ideal white wall color to choosing warm copper light fittings. But recollections of her family began to creep in during the quiet times when the buzz of development stopped. She recalled the contemptuous remarks made by her father, "Bills won't be paid by cupcakes." The echoes of rejection persisted, including Michaela's arrogant dismissal and her mother's icy indifference. "I'll use them as fuel, though." One night, standing by herself in the room as the sun set over the city skyline, she said to herself, "This bakery is more than merely disproving them. It's about proving myself correct." Everyone stood across the street on the day the sign was put up, watching the gold letters sparkle in the sunlight. The cafe and bakery Dreamweaver. She could sense the beginnings of something new, something hers. Opening day arrived faster than she'd imagined. Despite the crispness of the approaching winter, people were drawn to the bakery because of its warmth. Inquisitive residents and friends who had come to support her made up the queue that extended out the door. As she made lattes and served pastries, Zero stood behind the bar with her hands steady and her apron coated with flour. "Honey cake with lavender." One woman mumbled after her first mouthful, "I believe I've just discovered paradise." Natasha bustled through the mob, a platter of croissants in hand. "A reporter from the local newspaper has reached out to you for an interview." She spoke to Earl in a whisper. She had already looked around the busy room, her heart pounding. "They smell success." Natasha made fun of it. Later that evening, when the doors had closed and the rush was past, Zero sat in the silent bakery. The local newspaper clipping announcing the Dreamweaver Bakery as downtown's new lover was already framed and hung on the wall. She was drinking a cup of tea. Zero was burdened by her journey. With just a little willpower and a vacation home her family had all but forgotten, she had begun her dream. Now she had something real, something significant. For the first time in years, she felt whole. It was more than simply her bakery. It was a fresh start for her, and it was only the beginning. When the altercation started, the Dreamweaver Bakery was humming with its typical vigor. Zero was at the counter, piping flowers onto a wedding cake with flour-stained hands. In sharp contrast to the cozy and welcoming ambiance, she looked up as the doorbell rang and saw her parents entering their presence. Her mother's well-styled hair was unable to conceal the stress on her face, and her father's arrogant shoulders appeared to slump beneath an unseen burden. "Zero." Her father spoke in a low but firm voice. "We must speak." "I'm occupied." Without raising her eyes from her task, Zero gave a chilly response. "This call isn't social." Her mother claimed that there was a hint of desperation in her voice. "It's about the corporation." Zero stopped, set down the piping bag, and used her apron to wipe her hands. She turned to them and said, "Let me guess. You need something, which is why you're here." Her father winced but continued, "We are proposing a collaboration to you. Equal portion. The ability to vote. Everything you've wanted." Zero couldn't contain his laughter. A harsh, unfunny noise. "Everything I've desired." "You mean everything you said I didn't deserve for years?" Her hands shaking, her mother took a step forward. "The company is having trouble. We've lost critical clients. Layoffs are on the horizon, and the bank has stopped our credit. We require new funding. Your money and business sense will aid in our recovery. Zero leaned on the counter and folded her arms. So, let me clarify this. Your final chance now is the daughter you disowned for failing. Her father's face clouded. Petty resentment is not appropriate at this moment. Resentments. An eyebrow was raised. It wasn't a grudge that you gave me on Christmas Eve. For my family, it was a severance package. Customers looked curiously at them, and the previously relaxed mood of the bakery suddenly felt tense. While cleaning an adjacent table, Natasha stealthily approaches, prepared to step in if necessary. "This isn't about us alone," her mother begged. "The goal is to protect the family's heritage." Zero's gaze grew strained. "You mean not mine, but your legacy." She handed them a piece of paper that she had taken from the counter. It was a framed picture of the laudatory newspaper reviews for the Dreamweaver. "My legacy is this, built from scratch without your help." Her father's voice broke. "We were completely mistaken. Now we can see that. Please assist us." Their faces were examined by Zero's, looking for even a glimmer of true regret. She saw despair instead. She was their savior, not their daughter. "No," she stated plainly, the word piercing the atmosphere like a blade. Her mother clutched her pearls as she gasped. "We would lose everything because of you. I was lost initially by you." "Zero," she said in a tone. "I understand. You made it clear to me that I was not very important to you. I'm just giving it back." Her father's tone became abrasive. "You're doing something wrong." "No," I said, taking a step forward. "You erred by underestimating me and believing that I required your help to be successful, and now you'll live with the consequences." Natasha slid up next to her as they walked away, their faces etched with the weight of their failure. "Are you all right?" "I'm all right. All of them are depressed." Over the next few months, they were observed via the front window of the bakery. Like wildfire, the news spread. The family business, which had once been proud, had declared bankruptcy. Their VIP clubs, fancy cars, and expansive house were all put up for sale. In their social circles, the murmurs became more intense. "It is now contemptuous rather than charming." It was Michaela's first taste of failure. The firm's failure left her jobless, her meticulously crafted facade crumbling under the pressure of reality. Christmas Eve's golden daughter, who now made ends meet with casual labor, she became more resentful with each failure. Their parents took up residence in a little flat. They were reduced to ashes in society. Henry and Vanessa, who were once untouchable, turned into cautionary stories of hubris and conceit. The girl survived it all. As her family disintegrated, her bakery grew into an empire. Standing up, she demonstrated to both the world and herself that not all legacies are inherited. They must be earned. She noticed Michaela standing outside the Dreamweaver bakery, where the morning rush had just started. A functional, somewhat worn jacket took the place of her once immaculate expensive coat. She seemed anxious, shifting her weight from foot to foot as she gazed through the window. "Open the door. What are you doing here, Michaela?" "Michaela," I paused, her customary confident manner replaced by uncertainty. "I'd want to speak. Have you got a moment?" Her arms were crossed. "Hurry up." Michaela swallowed hard. "I need a job." The words hung in the air and couldn't help but blink and surprise Michaela, who had once chastised her for following her goal, now stood before her pleading for aid. "Are you serious?" I asked, lifting an eyebrow. Michaela answered firmly, "Yes. What you mentioned about proving myself and finally earning something has been on my mind." Zero examined her sister's face for any indication of deceit or a hidden agenda. All she saw, however, was sincere fatigue and resolve. Fine stated as he moved aside to make room for her. "However, you begin from the bottom. No special treatment," Michaela said. "I wouldn't expect anything else." "Good," Ole remarked, giving her an apron. "Wipe down the tables first. After that, I'll demonstrate how to operate the dishwasher." Michaela nodded. Her well-groomed hands, not used to hard work, trembled as she scrubbed the tables, tying the apron around her waist and reaching for a cloth. She was sweating profusely at the end of the first hour, and her knuckles were sore and red. "Are you all right?" During a little break in the bustle, I inquired. Michaela's voice faltered, but she added, I'm fine. I'm worthy of worse. Paul gave her some hand lotion and stated, "No one deserves to suffer. You must, however, learn. You won't last if you don't look for yourself." Mikola adapted to her new reality as the days stretched into weeks. Under close supervision, she loaded the industrial dishwasher, cleaned floors, and even learned how to make lattes. Slowly, she began to grasp the importance of hard effort and the pride that comes from achieving something yourself. Their parents were also going through changes at the same time. Previously the dominant leader of a legal practice, their father was now employed as a dishwasher at a nearby cafe. His hands, which were formerly used to sign contracts, are now polished glasses and cleaned plates. Once in charge of social groups and charity galas, their mother accepted a retail position at a department store. She initially resented the humiliation, but eventually she found comfort in making her own money and interacting with regular people. Michaela got close to Zero one evening as the bakery was shutting. Her voice was shaking as she said, "Thank you for giving me this chance. This wasn't something I did for you." As he walked to the main door, Zero answered, "You achieved something for yourself, and you should be proud of it." Michaela nodded, her eyes shining for the first time with tears she had not yet shed. Zero did not see her competitor sister. However, Michaela was humiliated, stunned, and finally saw what was most important. The Dreamweaver Bakery was no longer only a favorite among the locals. Now, the entire city was buzzing about it. Customers came from all over town to sample Zorro's masterpieces, and when the bakery's consistent earnings led to positive reviews and social media mentions, the excitement only became bigger. Cyril started looking for fresh prospects. She made investments in 2 other downtown properties, leasing one to a tiny artisanal coffee shop and converting the other into a comfortable cafe. But it wasn't just about business. The community was included in Zorro's vision. Her most ambitious project was creating a small business incubator in a historic structure. The center would provide mentoring programs, workshops, and reasonably priced office space to anybody who wants to start their own business. It was an opportunity to share the difficult lessons she had discovered while pursuing her goal. One evening, when they were finalizing the arrangements, she informed Natasha that it was more than simply baking. "It's about giving those like myself who simply need a chance opportunity." Her achievement became too much for her family to overlook. Her father visited the bakery one evening. He appeared older. Months of diligence and humility tempered his previously commanding appearance. "This location is amazing," he remarked, surveying the busy area. "Regards." "Zero," she said in a bland tone. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "I'm proud of you. Not only for what you've built, but for who you've become." It was the first time she'd heard those words from him, and while they didn't erase the past, they planted the seeds of something fresh. Her mother also started to change. She no longer bore the haughty air of someone used to being served instead. She volunteered her time at the bakery's community activities, and even offered to lead the incubator's basic budgeting seminars. Michaela got her footing in honest employment, and is currently a manager at one of the Dreamweaver sites. She frequently asked girls for advice, and their once cold bond softened into something like sisterhood. She thought about how far she had come one peaceful evening when she was sitting in her office going over the plans for her next project. Retaliation was no longer the reason for her success. It wasn't about proving her family incorrect when no one else did. It was about establishing her own value and proving herself correct. Her dream was the bakery, but her real victory was the person she had grown into. As Zora adjusted her name tag, the hall was alive with excitement. Dreamweaver Enterprises, CEO Zorro Fernandez. Cameras flashed, and business leaders mixed around her, documenting the glamour of the yearly local business awards. Near the rear of the room, she could see her family. Her dad sat rigidly. His suit was well pressed, despite being a little worn. The perfect exterior of her mother had become softer. She gripped her evening bag, her eyes darting anxiously. When their eyes met, Michaela, who was sitting between them, smiled tentatively. In fact, they arrived. As she gave Zorro a glass of water, Natasha whispered, They've been making an effort, Zorro said quietly. That has some value. The mayor stepped onto the stage before Natasha could reply. The recipient of this year's Business of the Year award is someone who epitomizes creativity, tenacity, and a dedication to community. The mayor made the announcement, from modest origins to a citywide sensation. Beginning with its founding zone, Dreamweaver Enterprises has changed lives. Welcome to Zorro Fernandez, ladies and gentlemen. Zorro walked to the podium to a thunderous round of applause. She felt stable despite the strong lighting. Her self-assurance was as solid as the foundation she had established for herself. Thank you. Her voice was clear as she started. When I started this trip, I never envisioned being here today. The Dreamweaver started out as a personal ambition, a means of demonstrating to myself my capacity for meaningful creation. She stopped and looked at her family. However, I came to a much larger realization along the way. Building isn't the only thing that makes you successful. It's about who you help along the way and who you become. She kept looking at Michaela and her parents. You can sometimes learn the most from the people who have hurt you. Although they didn't always support my goal, my family has developed along with me. Their willingness to change, to work hard, and to rebuild relationships taught me something I'll carry forever. There is always time for redemption. As she stepped back, her heart lighter than I had felt in years, the applause grew once again. As the visitors dispersed later that night, her father came up to her. "Your words," he replied gruffly. "It had great significance." I grinned. It wasn't for me alone. It was for all of us. A week later, the family met at a city park, volunteering for one of Earl's community projects. They transformed the area by painting seats, planting flowers, and cooperating with neighbors. Michela wiped a streak of paint from her face and grinned. "I think I miss my calling as a landscaper." As he adjusted his gloves, her father laughed. "Be cautious. You can start to appreciate hard effort. Observe them," her heart overflowing with a mix of pride and happiness. She didn't grow up with this family. It was superior. A family that had come to understand the value of beginning anew and letting go of pride. Zero took a step back to appreciate their effort as the park was bathed with a golden glow as the sun sank below the horizon. A reflection of their trip, the once neglected room now burst with life, looked fantastic. Her mother stood next to her and spoke softly. "Yes, it does. Nothing. I agree. And it felt like home for the first time in years."